You are listening to Beyond the Wheel, a podcast about the people and ideas that drive the RV community forward.
Looking to get out there and stay out there? Battleborn Batteries lithium-ion batteries are here to power your RV, marine, and off-grid adventures. Designed as an easy drop-in replacement for traditional lead-acid batteries, these reliable solutions have 2 to 3 times the power, charge 5 times faster, are a fifth of the weight, and last 10 times longer. Offered in a variety of models in unique sizes and shapes, ranging from 50 amp hour to a robust 270 amp hour. And backed by a 10-year warranty. Battleborn batteries are built to fit your needs and power your experiences. On the road, on the water, and off the grid, reliable power is here. Check them out at battlebornbatteries.com.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Beyond the Wheel podcast. Today, we are literally shifting gears a little bit here, and we're going to talk about RVing, but maybe not traveling. And that may sound a little strange to you, but to believe it or not, it's not that all uncommon for RVers to own an RV, to park it somewhere, and not really do too much travel. And there's a few reasons why an RVer may do that. And on today's show, we're going to kind of discuss that and kind of explain just a little bit about the trend of this becoming more and more popular. It's actually very fast growing to purchase an RV and just park it somewhere and use it as your home base. Without any further ado, we'll get this episode started. Sean, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Kenny. I'm looking forward to this topic because I think another piece of it is that I was thinking about earlier is also like seasonal sites where people, like there's a campground we always go to by Virginia Beach, and it's only opened basically spring, summer, and fall. But they have seasonal sites where people will just take their RV there and park it for the season, for the whole time, and just go up there like on weekends to go to the beach. So it's an interesting topic. Definitely lots of pros and cons to RVing like that.
You know, for you guys listening at home and maybe thinking to yourself, maybe you're a naysayer and say, you know what, I can't imagine there's that many people that own an RV and don't actually travel anywhere. The number of people living full-time in an RV has doubled, almost doubled. Since 2021 has gone from 240,000 people to almost 500,000 people today. Now, of course, that number is including the people that do and do not travel, but just the fact that that many people are now living in an RV compared to 2021 is pretty incredible in itself.
I was amazed by that number. I didn't think it would be anywhere near 500,000 people living full time.
Yeah. Without having the numbers in front of me, I would have said, you know, that peaked in 2017, 2018, maybe 2020. I wouldn't have guessed that has shot up after that. I would have never guessed that the increase really happened from 21 to now, because from 2019 to 2021, it relatively stayed the same, right around 240,000. It really didn't start climbing until after 2021. And without having the numbers right in front of me, I would find that very hard to believe. I would have said, oh, well, that's when all the YouTubers were coming, Were the Russos and Less Junk, More Journey. I feel like that was all in 2017, 2018, and people living in their RVs and that whole big social media boom about living in your RV. I would have never guessed it was actually 2021 is when it really started taking off. It's incredible.
I guess maybe the whole remote work thing that came on during the pandemic maybe increased it, but not double.
Yeah, not double. Yeah, and I think that has a big part of it. People are now basically working from anywhere. I'm sure that has a lot to do with it. Yeah, that would make sense. We're just on kind of dive into this unique side of RVing and the people that are living full-time in their RV, but barely traveling. So we're going to focus on that portion of it. The people that maybe don't use their RV for travel, they're just using it as a home, as an apartment, as a condo, like a little condo on wheels that actually doesn't really go anywhere. And I've met a few people in campgrounds that live this way. You could go to KOAs are doing this. I believe Thousand Trails allows you to do this, where you can do monthly sites. They hook up a electric meter and they can regulate how much power you're using so they know what to charge you. Or some campgrounds just roll it all into a single monthly fee. But I've spoken with people that do this, that they live on a campground and they seem to be very happy with this idea. I know there are some really nice campgrounds, right? You get a lot of amenities. So there's a lot of pros to maybe living on a campground. And we're going to talk, like Sean said, we're going to talk about these pros and cons. And I got to, this isn't written anywhere, Sean, but I do have a question about you being military, and the military has campgrounds on base. I would imagine that some people lived in their campground while on base too. They weren't really necessarily traveling. They were using that as their home.
We did it for the last 2 years that I was in the military. We lived at the base campground in our RV because we knew, well, first of all, to live on the base, it was like a 2-year waiting list to get housing. Julie and I couldn't agree on a place to live off the base, so we just decided to stay in the campground, and they have certain rules, like you can only stay for so long, then you have to be out for a certain amount of time, or, they have
Okay.
weird rules like that. So we would just go to a local campground for a couple weeks and then come back and get a spot. We knew a few people. There was probably half a dozen or more that lived in their RV at the campground.
Okay. And I would imagine, and we're going to talk a little bit about the pros, but the pros for you guys being right on base is convenience, right? I mean, you're just a moments. Would you even have to drive into work, or are you close enough to walk into work?
No, I had to drive. It
You
was
still drove.
probably a 10-minute drive, but
Oh,
still, you don't have to go through the part of working on a base is you have to go through the gate in the morning and leave in the evening, limited exits and entries. So you're
mm,
waiting in traffic. I didn't have to do that part of the commute. So it was nice.
that's cool. Yeah. So, and we're going to talk, like I said, we're going to talk about the pros, but we will also kind of shine a light on the negatives, because for some people, this may not be their ideal living situation. Maybe some people are doing this because of financial reasons, to save money and things like that. I know, like on social media, a lot of times all RVing looks glamorous, and for some people, it may not be. It just may be what they can afford at the time. So they could just be doing it for lower cost of living. I don't want to say forced into it, but they may feel kind of pinched, and that this is their best option to save money and to provide for their families to move into RV. So we're going to talk a little bit about both, the highlights of maybe living this way, and the downsides to it. So starting with, it is or should be a lower cost of living compared to renting or buying a house, even compared honestly to buying an RV and then traveling with it. Of course, the RV itself is a big purchase and it's a lot of money out of your pocket, but at some of these vehicles at 8 miles per gallon, it's expensive to move. Just to move your RV and get around to see these sites is expensive. And then, once you're out of a certain area and you're into an area that maybe you're not that familiar with, you might get stuck staying at a campground that is way more expensive or maybe out of your budget. The fact of just being stationary, you save a lot in costs. Just fuel. You're probably not exploring and doing like touristy things. You're just going to save a lot of money. The least, the less you travel, the cheaper RVing is.
Yeah, not to mention you're gonna accumulate less stuff, so you're gonna probably
Mhm.
buy less stuff because you just don't have anywhere to put it. Living in an RV, it's a limited amount of storage, and you're on a limited footprint as far as area around your RV that you can put stuff.
Yeah, it's almost like forced into minimalism or downsizing, because you don't have a lot of options as far as what you can collect and use. But that too saves you money, because you're not
Yeah.
going out and you're not buying a whole lot of toys, and you have to be very conscious of what you bring into the RV. I guess, Sean, the one plus size of, if you're not traveling, I guess cargo capacity at that point, if you're not driving down a highway or anything like that, I guess you can load up. I guess you can use your full capacity of your storage space and not really worry too much about how much weight you're putting in them, but you're still limited to space.
Yeah. Yeah, I know when we did it, Kenny, after those 2 years, and then we moved back into a townhouse, we had stored all of our stuff in those pods, the
Oh,
pods
yeah.
where they store them for you. So we had all of our stuff in 2 pods. When we got the stuff, we realized we didn't need 90% of it. So it really did force us into a minimalist
Mhm.
lifestyle that we still even keep.
We were being minimalist, I feel like, when we lived in the RV full time. But since we've been getting out, we're back at home, our home base in Arizona, we are slowly creeping back into our old ways. And Sabrina and I talk about every once in a while, we really need to like go through the house and get rid of, we're collecting too much stuff. We're starting to fall back into our old ways. For some people, I talked about they may be forced or feel like they need to do this type of lifestyle. But for some people, people that are retired or on fixed incomes, this is a great way for them to kind of get financially squared away. You don't typically have property tax, your school taxes and stuff like that are kind of worked into your monthly. Like, what your monthly bill is going to be for an entire year in advance with really no surprises other than maintenance to the RV. But because you're not bouncing your RV down the road, even maintenance on the RV should be very, very simple. You shouldn't really be running into too many problems. I feel anyway. You're consistent with your power that you're at. You're consistent with the water that you have. You should have a very low, I would say, low maintenance and cost of living, or at least know what's happening in the next year when you're set up like this.
Yeah, and you can do things that maybe are a little more economical in terms of electricity and things like that where you can save money. I mean, you can still use solar
Hmm.
versus, a lot of times when you're full time at a park, they'll charge you for electricity. Or if you're living on a piece of land, you'd have to pay electricity. You can still use solar power, and instead of running to fill up propane every 2 weeks in the winter or 1 week, you can get a big propane tank usually to keep, so you're not having to fill up all the time with propane and maybe get it at a better price or maybe a discount if you're getting so much.
Yeah. Yeah. I know the extended stays are usually pretty popular and welcomed at the RV parks and the campgrounds. They don't usually have a problem with you having an extended stay if they allow extended stays. I'm also talking about extended stay is usually what the term used for one of those propane tanks that you like an external propane tank that you do to your RV. And I remember the story too, Sean, of you guys were staying somewhere for a little bit of a long term, maybe a month or two, and you had kind of shut power down at the post and you were using your solar power. And I remember the office having somebody come out and talk to you guys about they thought maybe something was wrong with your meter because they
Yeah.
didn't feel you were using enough electricity. And that's just how much you can actually save when you're able to use your solar system like that.
Yeah, yeah, it was amazing how much money we saved.
And I like what you said earlier too, Sean, like seasonal work. Maybe you're living in an RV for work. Maybe you're doing like location based jobs. Maybe you work in agriculture, amusement park, construction. I know it's really popular with construction workers for companies to send their guys out, nationwide, and they just take their RV out and they usually give them a stipend. They usually pay for fuel. They might even pay for their campground. And it's much cheaper than putting them into like a hotel or even like an Airbnb or some type of housing like that. So I think that's really popular. And then, of course, camp hosting is really popular. I've ran into several camp hosts that love that lifestyle for that reason, that they're working right on property. And then there's also people that enjoy it for the community reasons. You're at a campground, maybe you got a pool, maybe they have a rec room and you guys go play bingo and you play cards. I think community wise too, you almost live in your own little, not always gated, but like that. You live in your own little neighborhood of RVers and you're staying with people that are kind of like-minded. So I think it can be good that way too, that you have a built-in community in your park like that. It's usually I see a lot of kids when they're doing the long-term stays, so your kids have friends that they can grow up with. I don't know how schooling works. Like, if you lived in a campground, I wonder if school buses would come into the property and do a pickup. If there was enough kids, I guess they would, but I would imagine maybe you do need to drive your kids to school. I'm not really sure. I bet you there's some campgrounds that are big enough that have enough people living that a school bus would come and pick them up even.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. That's a good question, actually. I do
So
know too, it's a good way for snowbirds to
mhm.
travel between location. You travel with your RV for half the year up north and half the year down south. And so you're essentially stationary, but in 2 different places throughout the
Yeah.
year.
Yeah, we even know people. So, Sabrina and I do a lot of trips to Mexico, and some of the campgrounds down there, people buy a reasonably priced travel trailer and they sit it down on the beach and in a campground on the beach. And that RV doesn't go anywhere. Like they stay there
Mm.
for 6 months. And then in the winter, they either go back up to Canada or somewhere here in the United States. And that trailer stays there though all year round. They just pack it up, they secure it for their winter or their summer rather. They're not there in the summer, they're there for the winter. They just pack it up and secure it for the summer, and then they go back down there. So that RV never moves. That RV might be there for 5, 10 years and never actually move. It's
Yeah.
just their snowboarding. Well, maybe they're doing snowboarding, but that not in Mexico. It's just their snowbirding location. And if you pick some place like Mexico, Sabrina and I actually looked into this. We were able to find places that were under $5,000 for the entire year. And that's including your utilities, everything. It's pretty reasonable. In
That's
fact, it would
pretty
probably
affordable. Yeah.
yeah, it would cost you more to go down there and pick it up and drive it somewhere else. Like it's
Yeah.
just financially, it just makes sense to leave it there. And I guess it's financially, it works out for those campgrounds too. Because I would think it would be better for them if they did have the turnover, if someone would go down and pick it up and then maybe somebody else rents that spot. But to them, I guess having it full 12 months out of the year is better than cycling through, I guess. Eh. But we are curious from you, of course. We want to hear from you. Do you live full time in an RV and don't travel much? Do you know people that live in an RV full time and don't live too much, don't travel too much? What are some of the reasons? If you do, why are you living in your RV and not traveling? And then, of course, we're curious too. Is it like rising costs of traditional housing? Is that pushing more people into? I guess you would call it a stationary RV life. We're just curious to hear of. Always, we're just curious to hear from you guys.
I did think of one more one more pro, Kenny, that I think is worth addressing is you have less, not only, like you said, lower maintenance than on a house or if you were driving your RV around all the time, but also, like, you don't have to worry about things like usually, like, mowing the lawn or
Oh yeah,
things like that. That's usually all done, trimming the hedges, all that stuff's done by the campground, so you don't have to worry about doing yard work, so you're saving a little time and money on that equipment as well.
yeah. You're definitely saving time on property maintenance. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, like you said, mowing, trimming hedges, all that snow removal, anything like that, you're saving your back too if you're like out there
Yeah,
shoveling snow. But
yeah.
yeah, all that is taken care of for you. And if you have an issue, you just call somebody at the campground and they're going to fix it for you too. So, if you do have a power issue, that's true. That is a really good pro. You do save a lot of your time not going into so many chores. And even inside the RV, right? The RV is smaller. So less time cleaning,
Yeah.
just less time to maintain inside the house too. Yeah, I think that's another pro. And then I guess another pro too, like depending on the rig and your setup, if you have a truck to pull it, like in case of an emergency, you can literally just pick up your whole house and move if you had to get out of an area real quick. You have flexibility, I guess, to that
Yeah.
type of lifestyle. And you're not leaving everything that you own behind. You're going to hitch it up and you're going to take it out of a flood area or a hurricane area or just any type of storm area and just take everything with you and pets everything and just be safe that way. Of course, there are cons to limited space too. So yeah, it might be easier to take care of, it might be cheaper, but if you're a family of four, now you're limited space. Maybe you're working from home and you got kids at home, your wife's at home, your husband's at home, everybody's at home, the pets are home, and you're trying to work now from a very small space. I know for Sean and I, every time we do a podcast, 90%, 80% of the time I'm in the RV and I got to play with Belle and I got to get her all, get all of her energy out. And it never is 100% enough. So I usually record if anybody wants to paint a visual here. I'm usually sitting in my bedroom. I'm sitting on the bed. I use my dresser as a tabletop for the computer. And we have a solid sliding door in our RV here. And I close that sliding door no matter how tired Belle is. Once I close that door, she jumps up from wherever she is and she wants to see what's going on. I have a meeting actually. So this is a good example. I have a meeting with Winnebago tomorrow and I know it'll be the same thing. So like you try to get their energy out, you sit down and then it's like for a work setting and your dog wants to play or maybe your kid wants to play or show you something. So that is a pretty big con. Privacy is another con in an RV. There is no privacy in an RV. These doors are not, I say solid sliding door, but if Sabrina were to say something right now in the other room, you're going to hear her as if she's in this room. People hear you in the bathroom.
Not only people inside the RV, but you
Mm.
also don't have a lot of privacy to people outside the RV.
Yep. Yep.
The
Yeah. If
walls
there's,
are the walls are pretty thin, so if you're having a conversation and somebody walks by, lots of times they can hear it, or if people are partying and the couple RVs down, you're gonna be able to hear them.
yeah. The partying can be tough sometimes. The kids yelling and screaming from kids, dogs barking outside. You hear everything. Yeah, there's very little privacy, and vice versa. If you're loud enough, people will hear you outside. It does seem to be a little. It's funny that way. Like I feel like I hear more inside than I can hear coming out of an RV. But when you're in an RV, you hear a lot of the stuff happening outside. Tractors. There could be lawn care happening, and you're trying to take a meeting. That's definitely a pretty big con, I would say, is, they call that personal space, lack of personal space, I would say. You're in everybody's sharing the same space when you're RVing.
Yeah, another one is I think we briefly mentioned it, but when I was talking about when Julie and I did it on the Air Force Base, but not everywhere allows you to stay long term. Like sometimes
Mhm.
they have a max amount of days you can stay, and then you got to move to somewhere else for a while before you come back. So finding a place that lets you stay all the time sometimes is harder to do than it seems. And then also some not it may not even be the parks themselves that have the regulations, but the city or county may have laws against people staying in one spot permanently in an RV. So sometimes you have your own land, your own piece of land where you can do what you want on it.
Yeah. Yeah, you run into zoning and legal issues like the city itself bans full-time RV living. We've even talked to people that have started up their own like campgrounds and they have a difficult time sometimes convincing a county or city to allow them to build a campground because they fear it brings down property value. They think of sometimes they think of campgrounds I guess as a trailer park and they don't want people living out like this. They don't want people living that lifestyle. They don't want people bringing down the property value. They're afraid that they're bringing vehicles that look broken down, that don't look all that great. And they feel that it brings crime. But Sean and I have always advocated, and Sean and I have always talked about RVers in general like to spend money in an area that they visit. I feel like we typically do increase. Maybe we don't increase property value, but we at least increase the population in that area for the ones that are traveling through anyway. We increase that population enough that we're spending money at the restaurants, we're buying in their stores, and that would be the same for somebody that was living in an RV full time. In that you're going to increase your population a little bit, and that's going to put more income in that area. And if somebody is working from their RV, they should still be paying taxes, of course, in that state. So, I think there's more pros to it, but for whatever reason, zoning and legal issues and bans are well, not for some reason. I mean, we have seen smaller cities, even bigger cities, suffer from what they would call a tent city or
Yeah.
people living this way, and they do tend to bring down an area. But I feel like if it's an organized setting, like a campground would be, where there's actual rules, that shouldn't be a concern, but it seems to still be a very big concern for these communities that they don't want even a campground where people will be living full time. So, like Sean said, you can't always stay indefinitely. right? You sometimes you have to stay X amount of time, you leave for X amount of time, then you got to come back. Well, that time that you leave may be difficult to find a spot that's going to allow you to stay.
I think another thing too, Kenny, is weather. I know you've
Mhm.
stayed in some cold places in your RV for Sabrina's working, and you have real issues with like pipes freezing
Yep.
and things like that. So that's another consideration that you should have if you're going to do this is you may have some issues with either in freezing weather or in really hot weather. Once it gets so hot, the ACs in the RV just can't keep up. So
Yep.
just be aware of those things heading into it.
Yeah, the cold, we've been in areas that was 10 degrees and it stayed at 10 degrees for long periods of time where the dump station actually froze and broke and we couldn't use the dump. We couldn't empty our tanks because it just, it destroyed their sanitary station. We've been to places where the pipes freeze and even if they don't burst, once they're frozen, you can't use them either. So a lot of parks will where we stayed. Now, obviously, most people don't do this, but yeah, I mean, we do sometimes stay in very cold climates throughout the winter, and they have to shut the water off, and you're just relying on your internal components. I have a fresh water fill that we can gravity fill, I should say, that I can fill up, and then we use our water pump. There's companies that air skirts to try to help keep your RV warm, to keep your plumbing warm. Summertime too, just like Sean said. I see more people talk about winter than summer, and I feel like summer can be just as rough because the ACs do not keep up. We're at 28 feet. We have one AC. It's a 15,000 BTU. We could easily use a second one in here. Florida in the sun, Arizona in the sun. One AC is not enough to keep up. You need two ACs in here. Fans help, though. I have found that fans really help make it feel cooler, even though it's not actually getting cooler. There's that dog. And it's probably just a neighbor walking by. So that's a perfect example, really. I mean,
Yeah.
of you're always sharing space with everybody around you. You also have challenges from the weather too. Sun, the heat, breaking down components in your RV, all that stuff happens. Weather wise, the RV is not built the same as a house. It's not going to handle a mudslide or high winds. You got to be careful on high winds. They are high profile vehicles and they're not actually bolted down to anything. So of course, like I said earlier, you could hook everything up and get out of there. That's probably your best bet if you're worried about the storm being big enough to actually pick you up, knock you over, or anything like that. Just leave. If you short notice, just leave even without the camper. Just get out is always the best advice. But they're not built the same as a house. They're not going to be able to withstand the same level of storm that a home would. And that's definitely a big con for the RVs also.
Yeah, and then I guess we can talk a little bit about RV parks, communities, and culture. Like we said, not every park offers long term stays, but the ones that do normally offer monthly rates or weekly rates. We've stayed at places that have weekly
Yeah.
rates. Most RV parks have decent amenities, including laundry, mail, and I'll put internet in quotes because it's never that great. When Julie and I were living full time in our stationary, we didn't send our mail to the campground. We got like a post office box
Hmm.
and did it that way. Just it was just easier than having to deal with the campground mail. But there's ways to do mail when you're living stationary, whether the campground accepts it or if you just go in town and get a PO box or a FedEx box or whatever the UPS store box. There's lots of places that can do mail. But what I liked is that most of the campgrounds had laundry, so you didn't have to worry about finding a laundromat or anything. Laundry's there. Most have a pool for when the weather's nice. Some have lots of cool amenities like a bar and a restaurant and things like
Yeah.
that. So depends on what level of spending you want to do.
Yeah. I'm currently at the Withville KOA in Virginia, and I would 100% live here. They do have long term living, monthly, yearly, and they got a bowling alley. They have a little pizza shop, and an ice cream parlor. miniature golf right on property, the pool, the hot tub. You can do your mail here. Like, it's pretty convenient living. And just having laundry on site, I think, is a great amenity in the fact that they're typically nicer than laundromats. The downside, they are usually a little bit smaller, and you might not, you go in and maybe there's not a washer or dryer available. This particular campground here at Withville, they do have something like 12 washers and 12 dryers. So they do have a lot, and it's very clean. The machines are always working compared to we've been to it's like other campgrounds that don't provide laundry. Then you're driving, then you get there and it's kind of junky. I mean, we've been to some laundromats where there's like a quarter inch of water on the floor throughout the entire place. And everybody's still in there just doing their laundry. We're like, I don't know about this. This just seems a little sketch. I don't know. So there are definitely conveniences to actually living on park property because of those amenities. Plus that sense of community that we were talking about earlier. Maybe your kids have friends that they can play with. Maybe you are now making new friends. But yeah, there is a sense of community. There's a convenience to it. The RV parks can usually accept packages too. If they do mail, they'll even accept packages.
Speaking of community, Kenny, the one that we stayed at, like I said, it was on a military base, so it was a little bit different, but it was in Florida, so it was a big snowbird place. So it would be jam packed in the winter times with the snowbirds, and they even had a mayor, like a mayor for the
Yeah.
RV park. They had a chaplain for the RV park, offered church services right there. It was like a little town where people that came year after year always looked forward to getting together with their friends. So the community feel, I think, is a little bit tighter than most neighborhoods these days.
Yeah, I would say it's closer than neighborhoods. I don't talk to my neighbors. When I'm
Me
back home, we met them when we first moved into the house, and that was about it. Now we'll give a wave if we see them, but I couldn't even tell you their names, Sean. Like, I don't even know the person that lives across from us, their names. We're not antisocial people, but distance-wise, we just live a little further apart from our neighbors compared to a campground. So, yeah, we're friendlier with the people that we meet on the road than we are with the people in our own neighborhood. But we don't have in our neighborhood, we don't have like a community pool or a rec room or anything that we would really be doing together. I feel like at an RV park, you end up doing more things together, either the pool or maybe, you're at the arcade or maybe you're just in the little pizza shop that's like inside the campground. I think about that Tucson KOA too that has, like you said, it's got a bar, it's got a full service restaurant, the hot tubs and the dog parks. Same thing here. You got a dog park too. So you start interacting with people at the dog park too. The social setting is stronger in an RV park. I agree. Stronger in an RV park than it would be in just your normal, typical neighborhoods across the US. I'm sure the people living outside of the RV park probably looks at the people living in the RV park and they probably think of them as less than, or maybe they're poor. And I don't think that's always the case. I think sometimes they're just making smart financial decisions. Maybe they didn't have the money for a house and they don't want to stress their finances. Maybe they do it just to save a little bit money. Maybe they're frugal. Maybe they're not like forced into it. I'm sure there's plenty of people that feel forced or pinched into doing it, but I wouldn't say that's everybody.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked to people on this show that are full-time RVers, but have very successful businesses and
Yeah,
are probably multimillionaires.
that's right. We have. Yeah, and they're living in their RV full time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's not the perception. Like Sabrina and I had family members that told us that, oh, you guys don't want to live in a trailer park. You guys won't fit in with those people. It's like what we were told. It turns out we are those people because we fit in just fine. But yeah, I bet you there is like some type of like unfavorable. I'm sure they are looked upon unfavorably in many situations. That's a shame because they're usually very, very nice people. They're not always poor. They're not always, what would the word be for it? A burden on society type of thing. We are contributing just as much as everybody else is a lot of times.
I think both of us, Kenny, we lived stationary for a couple years, but living in an RV allowed us to pay off a lot of debt. And so that was one of the reasons why we did it is so we could save money.
I think there's a lot of smart reasons to move into an RV. I don't know is if RV parks are catering more. This would be a question, I guess, for the audience. Like when you're going to RV parks nowadays, do you see more and more long-term sites available than before? I don't think so. I mean, me personally, feel like it's been just steady. Even though these numbers are increasing and there are more double the amount of full-timers, I don't think the number of permanent sites has doubled. I think I'm seeing about the same, really.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's about the same.
So I wonder if these numbers do continue. We went from 240 to almost half a million. At what point do RV parks start catering more towards the long term renters, if ever? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I would imagine there's going to be a time where if these numbers keep on increasing this way, that they would have to.
One thing I will say though is that living in an RV, it's not like owning a home in that the RV is not going to become worth more over
No.
time. It's not an investment. It's definitely a depreciating asset. So don't think of it as an investment if you are planning on living stationary or full time. Just know that you're not going to get the amount of money you put into your RV back out of it. So that's gonna be a cost to you. But like I said, doing that still allowed Julie and I to pay off a lot of debt and save money in the long run. So just your perspective on the actual RV itself versus a home.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty big con is that it is a depreciating asset. Even putting money into it is not going to make it all of a sudden valuable,
Right.
down the road. Typically, you don't get that money back out of even your upgrades. Like your upgrades don't even hold value. That's a great point. So you got to be smart when you're shopping. Sometimes it makes sense to buy new. Sometimes it makes sense to buy used. Try not to overpay for anything. Try to be armed with your best knowledge of what you're actually purchasing and what the real value of it is. I always recommend people shop on like something like an RV trader where they can see comparable prices all across the country, new and used. Having that in your mind of, okay, this is the vehicle. This is what I've been seeing at average price go for. So that when you go into a dealership, you're not, I don't know, don't let them talk you into a price that you're not comfortable with, I guess. I know at one time, we've said this before, at one time, yes, 3, 4 years ago, if you did not buy that RV, somebody else was going to. I don't feel like that's the case now. I feel like manufacturing has caught up with the demand. So you can walk away from one unit and you will be able to still buy another one. Like you're not behind the eight ball anymore when shopping. Because like Sean said, these depreciate value pretty quickly. Worse than a car.
Yeah, worse than a car.
Worse than a car would be. So yeah, be smart when you purchase. Buy what you I know it's always tough, shiny new and stuff, but buy what you need, not what you want sometimes too.
Yeah.
And that I think will help you in the long run if you did want to flip it, sell it, or trade it in.
So some future trends that we have here. One is that could rising housing costs lead to more people turning to RVs as full-time homes? I don't think so because, like I said, it is a depreciating asset, and people that buy homes typically do it with the expectation that they're going to grow in value and don't use it just as a place to live, but also use it as an investment. I don't think that's going to go away. I do think more people may choose to live in an RV versus live in an apartment or stay with their parents until they have enough saved for a home.
Yeah, and rising housing costs always. I mean, that's just and it's always been a thing is the housing has always been increasing. So I agree. I don't see it all of a sudden now making people turn to RVs as a full time. It may for some, but not enough to be overwhelming. I don't think. Will cities and zoning adapt to this growing lifestyle. We're at 240, now we're at half a million. I don't think so either. I don't think cities and zoning departments have any interest in adapting to this lifestyle. I think, if anything, they'll work harder to keep it from growing. I think they'll continue to work against it. I don't see them all of a sudden being like, oh, yeah, you know what? Maybe RVers are good people and we should be inviting them to stay long term in our town. And I think they just want us to visit and go.
Yeah. I do think though that the place to have full-time stationary living is in places like RV parks where they're supervised and have rules, to keep things from getting out of control, as opposed to you see reports of people, particularly out in real expensive parts of California, that are living in RVs on the street that are broken down
Mhm.
and junk is just piling up. I think if you let the RV parks and campground owners let people live there on their using their rules, and I think that takes away from the negativity aspect of it.
I think they should be supporting those campgrounds.
Yeah.
Let them have their rules, because otherwise, then you will just have people just trying to park on the street and causing chaos
Yeah.
in general. But yeah, the campgrounds will have rules for keeping things up a certain way. They're obviously don't have maintenance. Yeah, I think they should be working more with them. And hopefully that is the way it goes. And I think the industry itself, I know, just recently being at the Hershey RV show, we feel like we saw more RVs that looked to us that they were designed, they weren't your typical park model, but they didn't look like they really were meant to drive a lot. They had a lot of bay windows, a lot of glass, and we looked at them and we're like, and they said that it was like a fifth wheel. But then when you walked into it and looked at it, you're like, this might be a fifth wheel, but this isn't a fifth wheel that I don't think you could drive and move every day. This looks like something you would just park and it would stay for somewhere for 6 months, like maybe Mexico, and then you drive it back up north again. Like, this doesn't look like a daily driving vehicle. And we were seeing a lot of that. And I wonder if the RV industry is recognizing they have access to the same numbers that we do. So maybe they are seeing that, okay, this number has doubled in the last 4 years, that more people are just being stationary. Maybe we need to start building RVs with the idea of being long term stationary living for these consumers. Maybe they would put thicker insulation and residential appliances, things that would make it maybe a little heavier, knowing that you're not moving it all the time.
Yeah, that was one thing Julie and I liked about Hershey opposed to all the other shows, including Tampa, was that they always had a representation of RVs that were meant to be a little more stationary, I think.
Mhm.
And it seemed to grow every year that we go to the Hershey show, that selection. So I think you're right, Kenny. But I think, most RV shows, even Tampa, like I said, don't have that the
Oh,
way that
really?
Hershey does.
I've never been to the Tampa one. I've only done Hershey, and Hershey has always, since we've been going, has had like even a park model section where
Yeah.
they know they're not traveling anywhere with them, that they are just gonna drop them and keep them put, and you're on build siding around the wheels and everything, that you're not, they even have them, like, on display that way that you don't even see the wheels underneath. Yeah, I didn't realize that wasn't a common thing at the other shows. That's
No,
just a
no,
Hershey.
it's mostly
Ah.
Hershey has the best representation of those types of RVs.
Okay, and they're nice. I mean, they have a very home-like feel to them, like a little loft area, ceiling fans. You feel like you're in like a little tiny home, really. So, yeah, I didn't know that, Sean. I didn't know that was just a Hershey thing, kind of display the park models and stuff like that. But yeah, I definitely saw more park models this year and more, I would say, of the RV manufacturers too, making RVs. I'll put RVs in quote because it didn't really look like you would travel much with it. It really looked like you would park it. Maybe it's like an in-law suite or something like that that you would put on the back of your property even. I think we will see more and more RVs. Again, I'm going to put RVs in quote that are kept in mind for the people that are kind of using them long term and like stationary living.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. So do you think this lifestyle, full-time RV stationary living is sustainable, and would you ever consider it, Kenny?
Well, I mean, we did live in our RV for 5 years, but we were on the move a lot. I personally don't like sitting still. Like, even now we have our home base, and I probably ask Sabrina once a week, "When can we sell the house?" Like, I do not like having the home base. I wish we still lived in our RV full time. I think I'm slowly chipping away at her that maybe someday I will convince her that we need to live in the RV full time again. But again, like, if we were to move into the RV full time again, I would wanna continue to move. I know it's not the cheapest way to go because it is expensive to move the RV constantly, but this is how I feel about it. That the stationary, and I know you feel very differently than I do, Sean, but I feel like for us, when we're back in Arizona at home, I feel like it's Groundhog Day. And there's something about it that I don't like that, like from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed, I kind of know how the day is going to go. Whereas when like we're in the RV and we're traveling, I'm like, well, I don't know who I'm going to talk to today. I don't know what's going to happen on the road. I feel like every day is a surprise in a sense, I guess. And I don't know why against having the organization that comes with the house, but I like the surprise every day.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely depends on your personality. But like I said, we did live stationary for a couple years, almost 2 years in an RV, and we were very comfortable doing it. I think it's a great, not a long term situation. I don't think I would be happy there for years and years, but definitely in the short term, if you want to save money, if you're not sure of where you want to settle down, if you're going to have a house built and you want to, you're working on that, which takes some time, living stationary in an RV is fine. I would recommend it. It wasn't bad at all. We enjoyed it. And we even had 2 dogs with us that seemed to
Oh,
enjoy
yeah.
it too.
Yeah, the longest we've ever stayed in one location was in 2020. We did 6 months. Actually, we were here with Phil, KOA, and I thought those 6 months were fine being stationary. I didn't have a problem living in the RV without moving. It's more than doable. Like, we are very comfortable, even with the cons that we mentioned about lack of personal space and noise, even in the rain, right? The rain's louder inside the RV than it is in a house. But I typically feel more comfortable in the RV. Sean, you and I actually spoke about this a few months ago about like sometimes when I'm in my own house, I hear creaking noise in a room that I can't see. I've never been in my RV and be like, oh, I think maybe somebody else is in here with me. Whereas in the house, it's got enough size to it. I'm like, did somebody slip in through the back door, the garage door, the sliding door in the side of the house? Like, I feel like there's more for me to like concentrate on in the house. Or in the RV, like I can see from front to back standing in one location. I think often I am more comfortable, more relaxed actually in the RV than I am at the house for some reason. I
Wow.
don't know. Yeah. I
Yeah.
just feel like also with the house, I feel like there's always something that needs to be done. And that's true about RV life too, especially when you're moving. But I feel like when I'm at the house, if I sit down for too long, I'm like, "Ah, I should really get up and clean the garage. I should really get up, caulk our skylight that's leaking, or I should get up and clean up the backyard." Like I always feel like there's something that needs to be done at the house. And that's true too about the RV, but it's usually much quicker and much faster in the RV.
Yeah, that's true. There is a lot of maintenance both ways, but in a house, the maintenance typically takes longer.
Yeah, just a little longer.
Yeah. I guess our point, Kenny, is that RVing doesn't always mean constant travel.
Mhm.
And for some, it's the only way to afford a comfortable life in the near term or in a temporary sense. So we would like to hear from you guys. What do you think the future holds for the stationary RV lifestyle? Do you think it's going to creep up more? Do you think it's going to increase? Do you think it's going to decrease? All the things we talked about are, do you think the laws are going to relax to allow more people to do this? And I think also it may be a great entry into the RV lifestyle where you try it out stationary for a while. And then if you really like it, get on the road and or when you have the opportunity, get on the road and travel and start seeing stuff after you know your RV well and are comfortable living in it. So we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts? We always appreciate hearing from the listeners, and we would like to wish you all safe travels. And we'll be back in a couple weeks with another episode. Safe travels, everybody.
Looking to get out there and stay out there? Battleborn Batteries lithium ion batteries are here to power your RV, marine, and off grid adventures. Designed as an easy drop in replacement for traditional lead acid batteries, these reliable solutions have 2 to 3 times the power, charge 5 times faster, are a fifth of the weight, and last 10 times longer. Offered in a variety of models in unique sizes and shapes, ranging from 50 amp hour to a robust 270 amp hour, and backed by a 10-year warranty. Battleborn batteries are built to fit your needs and power your experiences. On the road, on the water, and off the grid, reliable power is here. Check them out at battlebornbatteries.com.